What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel for the very first Ask Me Anything episode of the postseason. I hope everybody had a fantastic weekend, and I hope you're all enjoying the first round so far. As always, when it comes to these videos, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to each and every one of you who took the time to come up with a question and send it in, whether it was on the community tab on YouTube or you sent it in on Twitter. Even if I don't feature it in the video, just know I read them all and I appreciate all of you guys. If you end up enjoying this episode and you want to see another one next Monday, then leave a like on this video. That's the best way to let me know that you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and you want NHL content just like this all year round. And with that being said, let's go ahead and start this off with the first question. This one comes from Nilo on Twitter, who says, do you think this has been the worst first round to watch since you started to watch NHL? I don't know about the worst. I definitely really have to sit here and think about it for a while, but I will say I've been pretty underwhelmed with the first round. I was really excited for a lot of matchups heading into the playoffs, and I think some of them just haven't delivered. Not that the individual games really have been bad. I think when it comes to playoff hockey, it's almost impossible for a game to be completely boring, but like we don't even have a single series right now that's even. It's either 3-1 or the series is over, or 2-1 in the case of Vegas and Dallas, and that's a series that, you know, Vegas was one shot away from being up 3-0. Wyatt Johnston really saved the Dallas Stars season. The three series that I was most excited for, Florida, Tampa, Boston, Toronto, Winnipeg, Colorado, they've all been pretty lopsided. I'm hoping that we can see a couple of comebacks and maybe see a game 7 or 2, but based off of everything we've seen in those series up until this point, I'm not really counting on it. It looks like the Leafs maybe without Austin Matthews for game 5. Connor Hellebuck really just hasn't looked like the Connor Hellebuck we saw in the regular season, and sure, Tampa was able to avoid the sweep and win game 4 on home ice. I think it's going to be very difficult for them to complete a reverse sweep or even force game 6 or 7 against a team that is as good and as deep as Florida. The next question we have comes from Zach on Twitter, who says, what additions do you think Steve Yzerman needs to make their Wings a playoff team? Who should he keep/let walk, and who should he sign in the offseason? So I don't think I've really talked about the Red Wings much on the channel since their season ended. The biggest thing that I'm looking for from Steve Yzerman in the offseason is to clean up the blue line. There is a lot of money and term tied up on veterans that, I'll be honest, aren't really making the team any better. The only pending UFA that the Red Wings have on the blue line is Shane Gostisbehere, and go figure, he's probably the one that the Red Wings wish they had locked up for a couple more years. When it comes to Gostisbehere, I feel like with the way he played this season, his point total, how he impacted the power play, he may have priced himself out of Detroit, especially considering the fact that the Red Wings have to sign Raymond and Seider both to extensions. When it comes to players in the blue line like a Jeff Petrie, Olli Maatta, Justin Hall, I think it's necessary for Steve Yzerman to find a way to move one of or maybe even multiple of those contracts in the offseason, get some cap relief, make it easier to extend Seider and Raymond, and just improve the roster flexibility, make spaces for young guys to come in and take some of those roster spots. We saw quite a bit of Simon Edvinsson down the stretch, and I thought he looked okay. I'm expecting him to be a full-time member of the team next season, but I'd also like to see guys like Albert Johansson get a look, and maybe Axel Sandin-Pellikka, who just had an unbelievable season in the SHL. There's definitely some other areas where the Red Wings need to improve and some other things I'd like to see Steve Yzerman do, but if I went over all those things, this video would go on way too long. I could probably make an entire video on all those things, so let me know if that's something that you guys want to see. But in my opinion, the biggest thing definitely has to be reshaping that blue line. This next question comes from Ben, who says, do you still see a Canadian team having a chance at representing Canada in round 3 or 4? It's been a mixed bag so far, and also really appreciate the kind words, and I'm glad you enjoy the videos. I think there's still a pretty good chance we could see a Canadian team, you know, in round 3 or 4. The team that I actually predicted from Canada to make it all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals, the Winnipeg Jets, are down 3-1. It's not looking too good for them. But when it comes to Edmonton and Vancouver, who pulled off a miraculous comeback last night, down 3-1 in the final minutes, ended up tying that game up in the dying seconds and then winning in overtime. It looks like they have that series in the bag. And I was kind of worried about Vancouver, especially after the injury to Thatcher Demko. And I mean, I predicted Nashville to win that series before it even started with Demko in net. But the Canucks have been really impressive in that series. I think they've shown a lot of resiliency, and doesn't really matter how they got there. They currently find themselves up 3-1. The Oilers had a very impressive win last night as well, 1-0 over the Kings, which is not really the kind of game you expect from the Edmonton Oilers. They aren't a team that's known as a defensive stalwart or a team whose goaltender steals them wins. With what the Oilers offense is capable of, if they can consistently find ways to win the low scoring, 2-1, 1-0 games and get this kind of goaltending from Stuart Skinner throughout the playoffs, I think they have just as good of a chance as anyone to win the Stanley Cup this year. Moving along now to the next question. This one comes from Chill Blinton, who says the Hurricanes have yet to play a complete game in the first round despite being up 3-1. Should they be concerned with their game since the competition will only get tougher from here? To be honest, I don't really think so. It's similar to what I said about Vancouver being up 3-1 on Nashville. It doesn't really matter how they got there. They are up 3-1. Just find ways to win games, and that's what Carolina has done so far in this series. They were one shot away from completing this sweep. New York was able to stay alive thanks to a double overtime winner from Matthew Barzal, but the Hurricanes are still in firm control of this series. Is there areas of their game they'd like to clean up? Definitely. I think you can say that for every team. But as somebody who predicted Carolina to win the Stanley Cup on my bracket this year, I'm definitely not concerned about them at all. I think this is a team that's only going to continue to get better and better the deeper they go into the postseason. And I feel like it really does say a lot about how good this Carolina Hurricanes team is, where you have people saying that, they've yet to play a complete game yet in the first round, and they still find themselves up 3-1. So once they start to find their A game, look out. The next question we have comes from Hatrick Kane, who says, is this the offseason the Leafs finally trade Marner and shake up the core four? If they don't complete a miraculous comeback in this series, that team needs a massive shakeup. And I feel like we've been saying that, year after year now, and it still just hasn't happened. There was people calling for the core four to be splitting up after the bubble when they choked that series against Montreal. Same thing the next year when they lost in 7 to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And then the year after, they were finally able to get over the hump. They won their first playoff series with this core together just to get waxed in the second round. And now here they are the following year getting waxed in the first round by the Boston Bruins. This is a team that just clearly cannot get it done in the playoffs for whatever reason. I really feel like everyone's kind of in the same boat on this as well. It's went on long enough. They've had opportunity after opportunity, and they just can't get it done. Now, the series isn't over, and yes, Boston did just choke a 3-1 series lead in the first round last year to the Florida Panthers, but I really can't see them doing that 2 years in a row. And to be honest, watching this series, it just looks like they are outmatched. They're getting killed in basically every aspect of the game. And like I mentioned earlier in the video, it's looking like they may be without Austin Matthews for Game 5 on the road in Boston, so that definitely doesn't help their chances. And I've also seen some people asking, well, why is it Mitch Marner out of the core four who is the one that needs to be moved? I think the answer to that's pretty simple. In the case of Austin Matthews, that's just a player you don't trade, because if you trade Austin Matthews, there's no way you're getting back fair value. He is, in my opinion, going to go down as the greatest Leaf of all time, one of the greatest goal scorers of all time. You don't trade that kind of player. And with John Tavares, his current contract just makes him almost impossible to trade. And if you are able to trade him, again, similar to what I said about Matthews, you're probably not going to get back fair value. You just signed William Nylander to a massive extension, so you're not going to trade him. That leaves Mitch Marner. Honestly, just by process of elimination, he's the one who makes the most sense to be moved if they are going to blow this thing up. Now, I will say, obviously the players deserve a lot of blame, and I do think the core needs to be shaken up, but I think there's other areas of the organization that needs a shake up as well, which leads me to the next question from RJ, who says, does Sheldon Keefe and or Brendan Shanahan have a job if the Leafs are eliminated in the first round this year? And my answer to that is no. I think they should both be let go. I don't think Sheldon Keefe is a bad coach by any means. He has a pretty unbelievable regular season record with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but again, similar to the players, they just can't seem to get it done in the playoffs. And I think it's been pretty clear series after series, with the exception of maybe one or two, Sheldon Keefe has been out-coached in the playoffs throughout the majority of his career coaching the Leafs. And Brendan Shanahan is the guy responsible for everything, pulling the strings, putting the pieces together, and it just hasn't worked. So I think his time should be up as well. I don't just think the roster needs a shakeup. I think the entire organization does, if they can't pull off a miraculous comeback here. Moving along now to the next question. This one comes from Stormcloud Films, who says, which team that's down in their series right now do you think has the best chance of coming back to win? And also, really appreciate the kind words. I really just can't see any of the teams that are down 3-1 completing a comeback, so I think my answer by default has to be Dallas completing a comeback over Vegas. They were down 2-0, lost both of the first games at home. They were able to win Game 3 thanks to a Wyatt Johnston overtime winner. Like I said earlier in the video, he really saved their season. And in my bracket before the playoffs started, I did predict Dallas to win this series over Vegas, so I'm going to stick with that. I know them being down 2-1 isn't ideal, but I feel like the Game 3 win is definitely a win they can build off of, so I wouldn't count out Dallas. I think they're the most likely candidate to come back and win the series. And now finally finishing out the episode with the last question from 4U2NV Hockey, who says, what player are you most disappointed in and most surprised about so far? For most disappointed, I feel like the answer has to be Connor Hellebuyck. Now, I don't think it's all Connor Hellebuck's fault that the Jets are losing this series. The team defense in front of him has just completely collapsed. It looks like an entirely different team from the Jets that we saw in the regular season. And if you're Connor Hellebuyck, you get used to your team playing one way for an entire season, and then all of a sudden it's just completely different in the playoffs. That's going to be difficult to adjust to. But just based off of the fact that said heading into the series, one of the biggest reasons, probably the biggest reason I gave Winnipeg the edge over Colorado is because I think they had the clear advantage in goal, and that just has not been the case so far. A couple of other players I've been disappointed in, don't want to beat a dead horse here, but obviously Matthews and Marner, time and time again, these guys just can't elevate their game in the postseason. Matthews had a big game too, and then other than that, you know, he hasn't really asserted himself and asserted his dominance in the series. True superstars find a way to elevate their game in the playoffs, and these guys just haven't been able to figure that out yet. And I know, again, beating a dead horse here, but I have to mention them. Now getting into some players that I've been surprised with in a good way. Stuart Skinner has been phenomenal in net for the Edmonton Oilers, which I guess shouldn't be that surprising. I mean, after his disastrous first month or so of the regular season, he was really good the rest of the way. Casey Middlestad has been fantastic in this series for Colorado as well, and I know the top line of Nichushkin, McKinnon, and Rantanen are doing a lot of damage, but Middlestad has really done a good job of elevating that second line as well, so I think he should be mentioned. And the last name I'll mention is Jack Roslovic. I've been pretty impressed by his play so far, and I was somebody who kind of criticized the Rangers trade deadline additions. I didn't really think they did enough to really move the needle compared to what some other contenders did, but so far so good when it comes to Jack Roslovic playing in the top six. He's been a really good contributor for them in the first round so far. So that is going to wrap up this episode of the Ask Me Anything series. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you guys want to see another episode next Monday, then leave this video a like. That is the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does help out the videos a ton. And again, huge shout out and thank you to every single one of you who left a question on the community tab post or sent one in on Twitter. I really appreciate all of you guys, and you all make these interactive videos so much fun for me to make. And lastly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want NHL content just like this all year round, hit that subscribe button, and I will talk to you all again soon.